Hello, YouTube. I was thinking of tackling something else at this point, but I got a response to a video I made regarding Micah 5:2. Thank you for commenting. I appreciate it very much. And they wanted me to check out Luke chapter 4, verses 16 through 21. And I'm going to read verses 16 through 30, but I'll get to that first. Their selection says, when he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. Now, the citation in verses 18 through 19 is from Isaiah 61, verses 1 through 2. And I'm going to go ahead and read verses 1 through 10 in Isaiah 61. And before I get started on that, verses 1 through 2 in chapter 61, they presuppose the character of the suffering servant that's mentioned in chapters 42, 49, 50, and 52 in Isaiah. And I've actually made a couple of videos regarding the suffering servant that I'll link to here. And I came to the conclusion that it's referring to the nation of Israel. So given that, let me go ahead and start reading. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to summon the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of retribution, to comfort all who mourn, so that to those who mourn for Zion be given glory instead of ashes, oil of joy to those who mourn, a garment of glory instead of a spirit of weariness." So, given the parallelism here, it's referring to people mourning for Zion and proclaiming release of the captives, and that's referring to Israelites who have been in captivity, which are now being delivered from the captivity that they've been in. And the rest of the chapter goes on to things that are supposed to happen after this good news has been brought. "They will be called generations of righteousness, a plant of the Lord for glory. They shall build the desolate places of old. They shall raise up the former devastated places. They shall renew the desolate cities, places desolated for generations. Aliens shall come feeding your sheep, and allophiles as plowmen and vine dressers." Allophiles is a transliteration of a Greek word that showed up in the New English translation of the Septuagint. It's basically referring to Gentiles. "But you shall be called priests of the Lord, ministers of God." And this is referring to Israelites. "You shall devour the strength of nations, and with their wealth you shall be admired. Thus they shall inherit the land a second time, and everlasting joy shall be above their head. For I am the Lord, who loves righteousness and hates spoils obtained by injustice. I will give them their hard work righteously, and I will make an everlasting covenant with them. And their offspring and their descendants shall be known among the nations, Everyone who sees them shall acknowledge them, because these are an offspring blessed by God, and they will rejoice with rejoicing in the Lord. So, all of the references to, they, and even you being used in a plural sense here, they're referring to the nation of Israel, just as, verses 1 through 2 were also referring to the role of the nation of Israel. Now, I'm going to go on to read some of chapter 4 of Luke here, because I think something interesting goes on. They said, "Is not this Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.'" Now, that's an interesting one. It must be a local folk saying of some kind, because that's not found in the Hebrew scriptures. And you will say, "Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum." And he said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown." That's a pretty bold claim. But are any examples given of, every prophet not being accepted in their hometown? But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Zidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian. When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. Now, I think I understand why they were filled with rage, because there's some interesting allegory and wordplay going on here. Basically the message is that, you're not going to be able to accept what I'm telling you. And, you're Jews, and because you Jews can't accept what I'm telling you, I'm going to go to the Gentiles instead. I'm basically opening up my ministry to the Gentiles. And that's what got them a little ticked off. And then it goes on. They got up, drove him out of the town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Now there's something interesting that happens. In verse 23, it says, Jesus says, "Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum." Where in verse 31 of Luke chapter 4 is the first time that Jesus actually goes to Capernaum. Now, the reason why this happens is that events in the Gospel of Mark have been deliberately rearranged by the writer of Luke, because he wanted this speech of Jesus's to go first. That's why Jesus mentions a ministry in Capernaum when he hasn't actually gone to Capernaum yet. You can go ahead and look that one up, but that is correct, that the events have been deliberately rearranged. And I think I've shown that the prophecy in Isaiah has been deliberately taken out of context. So, sorry, I don't get this one.